Hi, I'm Candace, and I'm talking about the spookiest stories in all the Star Wars galaxy. Since it's October, and since, of course, we love Star Wars so much, I talked to some of my fellow Waffles about what stories do they find the creepiest in all of this galaxy that we love. And we came up with this list of 13 stories. 13 because 13's creepy, right? So the very first one that comes to mind is Clone Wars Brain Invaders. It's the 8th episode of season 2, and it has all the hallmarks of a great horror story. It's an enclosed ship, and Ahsoka's allies are infected with this brain worm, and she has to find a way to defeat them, but also save their lives. And she's racing against the clock because those brain worms want to go out into the galaxy and infect everyone. So it's just Ahsoka against an entire ship of clones, which there is this heavy foreshadowing of the clones being mind controlled like they are with the chip after Order 66. And that's just even more heartbreaking. There's also a really disturbing point where Barriss, when she's under control but she's fighting it, she tells Ahsoka to kill her.
Kill me, please. I can't.
And that's dark. This is, again, Kids Show on Cartoon Network for kids. Number 2 is Star Wars Galaxies of Fear. If you're a 90s kid and was also a Star Wars fan, you probably know these books. It's a 12-book series that takes place after A New Hope. It's about orphans named Tash and Zach who were on a field trip away from Alderaan when it was destroyed. And they're taken in by their uncle, who is a researcher, and they get into a lot of trouble, and there's some really spooky things in this galaxy, and they have to just face them, like Darth Vader is one of them. And it was very much R.L. Stine-esque, Goosebumps-like. It feels like Goosebumps for Star Wars. It was the same reading level, and I read both of those back in the 90s, and I enjoyed and was creeped out by both. Number 3 is another Clone Wars episode, because Clone Wars. Season 3, Episode 12, Night Sisters. Because who doesn't like some space witches? Pretty much anything with the Night Sisters is creepy in the best possible way. We also have this dark story about Ventress being betrayed by another parental figure. Once we know her backstory and how she was sold into slavery and then lost her master and then was used by Dooku, it's so tragic. And there's this amazing scene of Dooku fighting the witches who did an invisibility spell. So it's like he's fighting ghosts. It's a really great episode that just screams spooky. Number 4 is Vader Immortal. It's a Star Wars VR game. You play as a Force-sensitive smuggler taken captive by Darth Vader. And he wants you to find an ancient Force artifact. And this is honestly the scariest Darth Vader has ever been to me. I don't know if it's because he's like talking at you in VR.
You are the one I've been searching for. Do as I command.
Because it reminds me of the Void experience that used to be at Disney Springs in downtown Disney, where it was Secrets of the Empire. And again, you hear him breathing and you see him coming at you. Vader has been portrayed comically. If you think about like Star Wars days at Disney, there's a Mr. Potato Head Darth Vader. So some of the fear goes away, but this brings it all back. Number 5 is another Star Wars Clone Wars episode, because this was a show for kids, and you know what? Kids need to be taught to be terrified. This is honestly my friend Krista, who I made watch this show. This is the one where she was texting me, and I think she was mad at me. We're talking about Brother in season 4. And of course, I'm talking about Maul's spider legs. Krista said it's the creepiest thing she's ever seen in animation or live action Star Wars. Possibly the creepiest thing she's ever seen. He looks like a creature from your worst nightmare that stumbled out from the bowels of hell. And the reason he's from a nightmare is because his new body makes absolutely no sense. It's only there to lead you down the same road of madness as Maul. I think Krista got it. So number 6 is Star Wars Rebels. The Mystery of Chopper Base. Giant spiders. That's pretty much all I can say. Giant spiders. It's towards the end of season 2, and There's also this foreboding because Kanan, Ezra, and Ahsoka are about to go face something. We don't know what it is at this point, but there is this fear that's looming over the Ghost crew. So add that and giant spiders. Number 7 is Dark Legends by George Mann. This book came out in July 2020, and it's a collection of fables, myths, stories you would tell at the campfire if you lived in the galaxy far, far away. All these stories are in universe. They even have a space werewolf story, which is really cool. And the artwork by Grant Griffin is just breathtaking. I love it. Number 8, of course, we have to add Lego Star Wars Terrifying Tales to this list. Because, you know what? Now it's a Halloween classic for me. Poe and BB-8 must face their deepest fears and hear some other stories, including one of my favorites. What if Luke joined the Empire early on? And I know Arzu, my Space Waffle co-host, really loves the Ben Solo story where he's coerced into causing some mayhem. Number 9 is Heir to the Jedi by Kevin Hearn. This was one of the first books that was published after Disney bought Lucasfilm, so it's one of the first canon books. And it takes place after New Hope, and it focuses on Luke. It's from his point of view. It's about him dealing with after the Death Star, becoming this rebel hero, and going on an adventure, and maybe falling in love with someone who isn't his sister. Sorry. But the reason it's on this list is because it has invisible bugs that drill into your head and eat your brain, and that's just spooky. Number 10 is Star Wars Adventures: Beware of Vader's Castle by Calvin Scott. This is a hardcover graphic novel that includes all the issues from Tales from Vader's Castle and Return to Vader's Castle. It's again in-universe ghost tales, and I find it fascinating what the galaxy's version of Bloody Mary is. Personally, my favorite story is the second one because it has Dooku as a Dracula figure, and Christopher Lee is famously known for playing Dracula many times in the movies, and it's really cool to see this homage to one of his classic roles. It also brings back Jackson, the rabbit from the Marvel Star Wars comics. So Jackson is back in canon. Number 11 is Bad Batch Infested. What is up with Star Wars and giant bugs? We have questions. It's that and tentacles. There's a lot of them. So season 1, episode 13. But to save a friend, the Batch plot a mission to sabotage a gangster's operation. Which, gangsters, yeah, scary, whatever. But what really is scary, or what called the Earlings? They're nocturnal insects that have visual sensitivity to thermal register. So if you're living, it will notice you unless you're cold-blooded, of course. Number 12 is Star Wars Rebels, Visions and Voices. This is season 3, episode 11. And again, the Night Sisters. Night Sisters are creepy, and I love them. And both Sabine and Kanan get possessed, and Ezra has to face them both, which, again, that makes it more terrifying, just like the Brain Invaders episode of having to fight someone controlling your loved ones. Also, Maul is literally haunting Ezra, to the point where Ezra thinks he sees him on the rebel base, and he nearly kills a fellow rebel officer. And he thinks he's going crazy. So there are just so many levels with this episode that are terrifying. Of course, there's also an episode where Sabine gets a Darksaber. Just gotta shout out my girl there. Number 13 is Death Troopers by Joe Sharuga by Joe. Okay, this was published in 2009. Death Troopers is a novel written by Joe Shuber. I can't say his name. So his idea, Joe's idea, was to create a horror story in the Star Wars universe. And he succeeded, because this is terrifying. It's pretty much zombies in Star Wars. We have Marvel zombies, we have Star Wars zombies. This is currently in Legends, but I would love to see them bring them back. And I'm hoping, since Andor is pretty successful in telling a different kind of story, we might get to see something like a horror story in the Star Wars galaxy. This was the first novel since the Galaxy of Fear series that had a horror element like this in Star Wars. It's set right before A New Hope, and Han and Chewie are in it. And it's about this virus, this artificial virus that infects people, and even after they're dead, they start zombieing it up. And yeah, it's creepy as hell. I highly recommend reading it. I'm sorry, Joe, I couldn't see your name. So I want to know, what do you think the scariest character, story, movie, book is in all of Star Wars?